Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Weapons.
Yes.
Written and directed by Zach Kreger. His second feature after Barbarian. We don't think either of us have seen Barbarian. But it's a highly regarded horror. And so is this. I mean, this has been getting all the hype, all the press, all the praise. People really love it. And I was going, we've really got to see this before people just start putting clips of it on Twitter and ruining bits of it because they're going to. The trailers have been fantastically exciting. Like, so the hook that it draws you in with, the premise, is that at 2:17 one morning in a Pennsylvania town, 17 kids, all from one classroom, all of the age of, I don't know, 10, they all leave their houses. They start running in this weird way with their arms out, and they're not seen again. They just go away. They go away, and no one solved this crime. I think in the opening voiceover from a little girl, so you know that it's creepy. She says this happened 2 years ago, I think. So the big question is, what happened? People are blaming the teacher of this class, who I think we're told is a recent addition to the town or to the school. One parent in particular, played by Josh Brolin, is extremely angry. But the film, what I didn't expect is that it would be structured the way it is, which is that it jumps from one character to another. It's split into chapters. So we start off with a chapter of Justine, played by Julia Garner, who's the teacher, and we see events in her life. And then we see a cop, played by Alden Ehrenreich, who is her ex, and we see the Josh Brolin character, this particular parent. We see the head teacher, played by Benedict Wong. And not only do we see, these characters sort of engaging in different aspects of their lives, we also see them kind of fall back on one another. For instance, two characters go to a bar, and the second time we see that, we don't see the whole scene. So it's not playing it full Rashomon. It's not going like, here's the complete alternate perspective. But we...
you get the intersections.
You get the intersections where they meet up, and we've seen the bits before. Although I do wonder, there's that one point where Justine sees her ex, the cop, the second time. I wonder whether he's got like a slightly different expression on his face. Where if you're looking, I think it's like she remembers it as him being very happy to see her, and then when you see him in close up the second time, he's kind of dispossessed and stuff because we've seen what's happened in his life just recently. And I wonder whether there are elements like that you might pick up, but none of that is of crucial interest. I don't think.
Yes,
but I think the structure really gives the film a lot of pace and a lot of, it chunks it up nicely. So the film is just over 2 hours long, and I didn't think it felt long. I mean, I think it felt snappy,
There were two things that I thought were great about the film. One was the structure, right? It's a really inventive structure, because of all of the characters that it gives narrative space to, the one that it doesn't is the villainess of the piece. Yeah. She doesn't get her own little chapter, right? You're always seeing her through the eyes of others. Yeah, which I thought was interesting. I mean, it's obviously structurally interesting because it keeps up the suspense. Yeah, you actually kind of don't know from one story to another. I mean, you find out more and more and more about her as the film progresses and as you get people's stories, right? But she always remains kind of mysterious and kind of, you never see her point of view on things. So that's interesting, right? That the only major character in the film who you don't get the story is
the villainess.
I'm not sure. So I suppose, can we have spoilers?
Yeah, let's say we'll get into spoiler territory. I mean, as I say, we wanted to see this before it got spoiled for us, so we advise you to do the same thing. If you don't want this spoiled, then you're going to have to stop listening now. We'll talk spoilers.
Okay. I was a bit disappointed that she was a witch.
Okay. Can you elaborate?
Well, because I think once you get into the realm of the otherworldly and the supernatural, the film could have had so many more interesting opportunities and images, and you could have made people fly or disappear or go. Yeah, once you enter to witchcraft, right, it could be anything. Whereas actually, it's kind of very specific. Yeah, she takes possession of these people. Yeah, and you don't even know whether she controls them or not, right? I mean, I think the rule basically is that you cross a certain line and this kind of zombie type body will then chase you until it itself is destroyed.
I mean, yeah, it depends on to what extent you're thinking of them as being controlled. I mean, clearly they're given, they're sort of hypnotized and given a goal by her, but they are able to go about that goal themselves. She's not puppeteering them specifically. But I don't think that's, I mean, that wasn't like the specific nature of what she was doing or the effect she was having on the people was not something that I questioned. I got it. I think the film is actually very good at, I mean, we talked just recently about Bring Her Back and how that film is good at handing out bits of information and pacing it out. I think this film is similarly good at that. And so, for instance, you know, we have this mystery throughout the film of what happened to these kids and why were they running like that and where were they going? Were they going somewhere in particular? All that kind of stuff. And that's not answered for a very long time, of course. But when we start to get answers about that is when she goes to the head teacher's house and we see this sort of magic spell / ritual that she performs, which involves a possession of his, blood from her, and hair from the person that she wants her zombie to kill. And we see that and we go, oh right, so we've seen her take possession of someone. That doesn't specifically answer what happened to these kids, but it starts to clue you into that. And then when you see, you know, the sticks come out again and things come out again, you go, okay, I know what's going to be happening here. In fact, it does that even right at the end very quickly. So it introduces a kind of new rule, which is when she puts down this line of salt, if you step over it, you're going to get attacked by zombies that are currently dormant.
Yeah.
We see that happen downstairs with Josh Brolin and Julia Garner. So we know immediately, once we see that same line upstairs, that is now in play for the kid.
The film is an idiosyncratic kind of hybrid of a witchcraft film and a zombie film. Yeah, because it has elements of both without being either. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for a while you think she's a witch, right? And she's casting a spell. And then at the end of the film you realize, well, it's just a wand, isn't it? You take possession of the wand and the child can do the spell. Right? It's not even it's not even a spell. There's no incantation. It's just, like you said, putting in something that belongs to a person around this wand.
And using your blood. I mean, there's like a recipe to it, right?
Yeah, there's like a recipe to it. But you don't need any special powers, ostensibly.
No.
Or the film doesn't say whether you do. I mean, maybe the child does have special powers because he's from that family. Who knows? Right? Like, but there's a lot of things that you just have to accept and kind of, as soon as you begin to think about them. Yeah.
Well, I don't know I had any trouble accepting those. I mean, do you have real trouble with accepting that this is the way this ritual works and that it has this effect?
Well, yes, I do. You know, because I think if it is witchcraft, then there's a lot of possibilities the film doesn't explore, right? There's also a lot of questions the film doesn't answer. Like, why does she need the children? Why won't adults do? Yeah, she says a mill. Right, but how are the children curing her? That I don't remember that being answered.
I do think that the film is implying there, certainly more than explaining. I think the implication you're meant to draw out of all of this is that she is trying to rejuvenate herself. We see that she's terminally ill. When we see the parent first saying she's going to come live with us, the dad saying she's probably got a month to live, and she seems already kind of more vital than that. But she says, the parents weren't working. I'm going to need kids from your school. Yes. Right? And I think the implication is like the youth is what she's going to feed on.
She's not sucking their blood, she's not eating them. She's not like, so how are the children?
No, well, I don't know.
I mean, they're just standing around in the basement.
But that I know what you mean, but that is also kind of like asking, how does the spell work when she controls people? Well, it's like, it is just magic, right? She's done the magic and the magic is
but come on. Another, If you're a zombie, you get bitten, you become a zombie, right? Like, so, and I think in most witchcraft films, kind of, if you need a body or a spirit or whatever, it'll tell you what to do. Yeah, if you need to rejuvenate, then maybe the younger person shrivels up into nothingness and you absorb their youth or, right, like something.
I'm not saying the film couldn't have gone there, but I think also
I mean, I don't think I'm being nitty-picky. It's just the film doesn't explain it at all.
Well, like I say, I'm not sure. It's not saying that I don't think the film could have done. I think the film could absolutely have gone there if it wanted to. But I also think that if you look at the timeline, these kids are kind of sort of supernaturally abducted from their houses, let's say, and then everything else in the film seems to take place within like the kind of days afterwards. Because although we're not given a specific timeline. She's essentially going like, well, the police are coming around, people on my back. Like, I don't think you don't feel like there's a lot of time being given here. So as to when she's going to get round to performing whatever spell it is on these kids to draw the power out, maybe we don't really see that in the film. Maybe it's something she's going to get to, but like the heat is on her too much. That was the way I was thinking. Like it didn't bother me that we weren't getting that much of an explanation about that. It seemed like you could buy that, or at least I could buy that.
So let me be clear. It didn't bother me when I was watching the film, but I don't think it's as great a film as it could be because it doesn't explain that. I think a better film would have, planted the seeds or used the symbol or made you understand the world in its fullness and how it works.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think this one doesn't. It all becomes like plot devices so that you're scared, right? Or so that you're surprised, right? Like kind of it doesn't go deeper than that. And part of the reason why it doesn't is because things have a logic. Yeah, you just accept that they work that way, right? But you don't understand the grounds of them, right? Like, is she a witch? What kind of witch? Why doesn't she just put a different kind of spell on them, right? Like, kind of, why doesn't she just erase their memory or whatever? A witch can do many things. So I think all you need is a line of dialogue, to say, this is my power or whatever, right? Like, a kind of, and I've been feeding off young kids for the last 400 years. Whatever, right? Like, just something is necessary, right?
It could be something like that. I wouldn't mind it coming in and going, hello, this is my power. The thing that I felt kind of was a little weak about the film is, I think, what a lot of people are kind of responding to, which a lot of people do respond to with quote-unquote elevated horror, which is that I think it's kind of thematically thin, which I wasn't expecting. People like these films are conspicuous in their allegory often, and you're thinking from the trailer, you're immediately thinking like, right, all these kids get abducted somehow from their houses, they all just leave, and a community is left going, where are they? So you're thinking, there's like the possibility of it talking about kind of modern fears about the kids and where they've gone, and paedophile scares and all that kind of thing. Like, it doesn't seem to be that from the trailer, but you're going like, that's the kind of fears that the film can be feeding into. I thought it could be questions of, because the teacher is the focal point in the trailer, of did she do this and what part did she play? So you're thinking of questions of parenting and, the schools doing the parenting or the parents doing the parenting, parents not being involved, that kind of thing. Like, could that come up? And then obviously the title, Weapons, and the idea of these kids no longer being part of the community, particularly in an American context, you're thinking of school shootings.
Yes, exactly.
And again, the kind of effects that kind of thing can have on a community. And I thought, okay, so I'm looking for where these kind of themes are going to be woven in or how it's going to evoke some of this feeling. And I actually felt very little of it. You get the panic of the community right at the start when this all happens, and particularly through the Josh Brolin character, who kind of becomes, you could slightly describe him as like an activist parent, kind of searching for answers and so on. And then right at the very end, when the spell is broken, but all the people who were possessed during that breaking, they remain kind of catatonic, and the little girl back in the voiceover says, the kids were reunited with their parents and some of them have started speaking now. And you kind of think like, that sort of, one reason that people in real life don't speak for a very long time is trauma.
Yes.
And the idea of kids having this trauma at a young age and coming out of it very gradually could speak to that. But that's like, it's so thin.
It feels missed opportunities because, the very first episode is the teacher, right? And you did think that, or I did think that there was going to be something explored there about misogyny, right? So, she's the one who's accused of being a witch. Why is she a witch? Because she had an affair with a colleague at her previous school, which is the reason why she got fired, right? Why is she a witch? Because she likes having a drink after work, right? Mm. And then, of course, worse, she's having an affair with a married man now again, right? So, and and the actress was wonderful.
That's Julia Garner.
Yeah, and I thought that the film was going to explore kind of some of these things, right? Because, the only reason for having her as a fall person is really because she's the teacher, right? But then the film goes further than that. It's because she's a bad woman, right? Mm. In quotation marks. So I thought that would be explored further. I also thought, how can you have this abduction of children and not bring up potential questions of pedophilia and so on? I thought it was interesting because the normal thing would have been to have attached that suspicion of pedophilia onto the head teacher who's gay, right? And you could have, created some real tension there, and overturned it, obviously, right? Like, you don't want to fall into these stereotypes, but it's almost like they're avoiding that, like a hot potato. That whole segment with the school, with the headmaster, you think, what is it doing, really? Yeah, other than showing a gay character in a loving relationship. But I think it could have tied it into that theme of accusations of pedophilia in a much more interesting manner. The Josh Brolin thing again, the thing about weapons in schools. Because isn't there a nightmare that he has, or a dream?
That's right.
Where actually it has a gun.
There's like an AR-15 over the top of the house.
Yeah.
Which actually, it was quite on the nose. But I also thought, like, this is something that Magritte would have painted had the AR-15 been around back then. Yes. Like, I thought this has a real blatant, surreal symbolism about it that I actually quite like.
So it brings it up, but then, I mean, if it made any further connections around school shootings or killings, I didn't get them.
I don't think so.
So I suppose my feeling is that it's a film that was kind of exciting, to watch. It kind of works, and it's unexpectedly funny in interesting ways, and it's unexpectedly complex in the sense that it gets some very good performances, right? I think Josh Brolin is fantastic. I think Julia Garner is fantastic. I think everybody else is at least good. Yeah, my only disappointment was Alden Ehrenreich. Ehrenreich, and only because the last time I remember seeing him in films, he was so good looking, and he now just seems so ordinary, right? Like,
moustaches don't do anyone any favors.
Yeah, he seems to have lost whatever looks he had. Well, it's an issue in film, right? He seems very ordinary.
He's only 35. He's younger than me.
Well,
I've held on to my looks.
Well, but do you agree with me that whatever, sex appeal he had, it's not evident in this film? And yet it needs to be evident because you want to give Julia Garner a reason to be having an affair with him.
I think when it comes to looks, I don't know, I could go either way, but his character doesn't have the kind of charisma that he's shown before. The kind of, you feel the appeal of the way he plays Han Solo, the way he played that kind of doofus in Hail Caesar, who had no brains about him, but you could see why that girl might be into him.
And he was wonderful in that, right? So, and here he's just a bit of a blank, and a blank without sex appeal. And also I was, how do I put this? Because I thought Amy Madigan as the witch was superb, and yet there are other moments where it didn't work. Her performance didn't work for me.
Go on.
So I thought she was superb in all those moments dealing with the child, right? Speaking to the child.
Yeah, keep my secret for me and all that kind of stuff.
It's just very menacing and so on, and calm. And I thought where she failed was in all her interactions with the larger public. When she goes to the headmaster's house, right? Kind of, I thought the makeup, the line readings, it felt kind of awkward, right? And I think there's some humor there that needs to have been drawn out that it didn't work.
Well, I think the film is trying to, certainly with her look, it's trying to draw laughs from the kind of the very different tone of her behaviour. She invites herself into the house and starts going, oh, this is wonderful in here. And also, we also know that she's lying about whatever she's doing. So the film is definitely trying to draw humour out of that. I think the film is really funny when it means to be, except for those, I don't think those really work.
Yes.
There are other moments which really did. I think a lot of the stuff, pretty much everything that happened with the homeless kid. I mean, he is a figure of fun, and stuff that happens around him is funny, and the film really gets that. And then right at the end, when the spell is changed and the kids all are sent after the witch and chase her, then people it sort of starts off as kind of menacing or confusing or what have you. But as it went on, it's a quite extended sequence. And people in the audience started laughing, and by the time they're just running past houses in the distance, people really got that this was supposed to be funny and were into it. It was quite funny actually to watch, in real time, hear and sense an audience figuring it out and changing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That was quite interesting.
That was quite interesting.
And that's actually kind of some catharsis about that, how many horror films end like that? With kind of real laughs and things. But it is doing that.
Other failures of the film for me was the visuals. I thought the image looked thin. it was like too dark. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it takes place at night, but it still felt like too dark.
This is the look of horror, really. I did sort of anticipate you taking issue with this, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I do think it's interesting when we see kind of in flashback, or we see the start of the kid's story before his parents have been possessed, before the aunt has arrived, how light and beautiful their house is. I mean, there's real focus on that. You go in and it's kind of bathed in this beautiful evening sunlight and things. And we've already seen the house once already, post possession, where, you know, the windows have got newspaper all over them, it's dark in there, it's dank. And I think it's particularly interesting how the aunt shows up, and within a couple of shots almost, she has made it into a horror movie house. The lights have gone down, all of that stuff. Like,
yes,
the horror movie look takes over the place.
Yes, but it's not made memorable. So yes, the horror movie looked... I mean, it becomes dark, is basically what we're saying. But aside from it becoming dark with her presence, yeah, like kind of... I think a better director and a better cinematographer would have made some of those images more memorable, more potent, more symbolic. And I don't think there's anything in the film like that. So, you know, I think it's very good at kind of structuring. It's very good at performance. You know, the director it's very good at keeping you at all moments interested. Yeah. And at creating laughs and at creating scares. I mean, that's not nothing, you know, but it's kind of also not enough to make it truly top notch in my view.
An image that will be memorable is the image of those kids running. The way they look, the way they're kind of silhouetted against streetlights and things. I mean, that whole opening sequence where you see it happen, again, it's quite an extended sequence. And I thought, I don't know if the music choice is right for this when it happened. It was kind of a, I don't know, like a bit of a rocky, folky pop song. I forget, I don't know what it was, but I thought, is this right for this? And as it went on, it really started to develop this weird feel about it that I thought, no, this is really working. I'm glad it made this an interesting decision for it to make. And I liked it very much. And, you know, the kind of that central mystery that it sets up is so compelling because of it. It's like all these questions, what the fuck is going on here? I think the film is really interesting. It does constantly keep you interested. It constantly keeps, as I said, passing out information in the right directions or at the right times and that sort of thing. I think you never feel like completely lost, and you never feel like you don't trust that you get somewhere interesting or something else will be explained that needs to be that kind of thing. I certainly don't think it's the film that everyone else seems to be seeing. I mean, I think there's also like a selection effect in this. Like, people will be vocal when they absolutely fucking love it, and the people who are going, yeah, it was fine, probably won't speak up all the much or get amplified all that much.
I liked it. I mean, I don't want to give the wrong impression. I did like it.
I liked it, but I thought it was fine.
I just kind of think, because, you know, I hate watching horror anyway. Like, it's not my genre, right? But in the past, I have found that it's the most interesting genre. Yeah, that kind of, you know, so in spite of me not liking it, it's kind of, you know, some of the most complex movies, some of the best critiques of the culture, you know, and so on, are being done in horror, right? I think this film failed at that, really. Yeah.
Well, actually, the more I think about it, the more I think that structure in particular, which is so good on paper, and which works in all sorts of ways, also amplifies the film's failures, because where I think the film is at its most interesting, or could be at its most interesting, is when you're talking about the effect this kind of thing has on the community. This is an incredibly weird, disturbing thing to have happened.
Yes.
And does it feel like the community is completely disturbed about this? We get hardly a look at it. We get interactions of the characters, but...
Well, you never get back to the community after the first scene.
No, I
right?
mean, that's where
it's
I think
all
this
about
film
these
really
individuals.
needs to... Yeah.
And actually, that might in itself be an interesting commentary on America, right? That, you know, the sense of like individualism, that everything is about the self and, you know, one's perspective and one's point of view, and the way that kind of, you know, there's a selfishness around that. Yeah, kind of the community doesn't matter. In fact, like, you know, what you have is a Josh Brolin character and his kid, right? The fact that there are 16 other kids with parents, right?
Yeah.
That's
in fact, when he comes across the kids in the basement, he's going, Matthew, where's Matthew?
Like he doesn't give a shit
like,
about
he looks
the
at all
rest.
these other kids, it's like, oh my god, this is where all the kids are.
Yeah.
Where's my kid?
Yes.
All about my kid.
And they're also 12, you know, or 10 or whatever age they are. And, you know, he's just not paying any attention at how they are, what they might need or how they might be feeling. So yeah, there's kind of, something seriously wrong with American culture, yeah, in relation to those things. So, and I think, the film's failings perhaps are also that society's failings, right? That kind of society doesn't seem to matter. And that these societal problems are based on some witch.
Yeah.
A little thing, so one of the things that caught my eye or worth discussing is, and I'd like your feedback on this because maybe I'm wrong, that the film also has a kind of interesting imbalance in that, in my view, Josh Brolin is a star. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something odd, or you wonder why it takes so long to get to him. So after the beginning at the school, it's pretty much, I don't know, what, 3 episodes later that you get Josh Brolin's story, right? He doesn't really come into the picture again for another, 40 minutes or something?
I don't know if you're exaggerating the amount of length of time but it's a while. We see a lot of other characters. We see Justine, and then I think we get the cop story before we get to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's interesting because, so, Pedro Pascal, who was meant to be cast in that role, right, and who is now obviously a star, yeah? And this, may be stupid, but, Pedro Pascal being introduced X minutes later somehow makes sense to me. Yeah, and Josh Brolin doesn't. Yeah, the kind of, yeah. And
it is sort of interesting to see an actor of his status turning up in a role like this.
In a horror film.
I mean, in a horror film, full stop. But certainly, when we see
an ensemble cast of a relatively low budget, yeah.
But that's where I'm going. Like, when we see kind of name actors in horror movies, they are at least the star.
Exactly.
Like, remember that film...
Ethan Hawke in...
Oh, well, yeah, you could say Ethan Hawke in The Purge. Or I was thinking that one we saw not that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Rebecca Hall was the woman at the centre of that thing where the house across the lake was a mirror image of hers, whatever it was called. It was not a very good film. She was amazing in it, I remember. But like, you're thinking that's where it should be. Or if he is, kind of second to the focus, which is ultimately on the teacher here, he would still have a much larger role. But I suppose that as you say, it's an ensemble, and the focus of the film is so disparate because we jump from one character to another when we see lots of different stories getting privileged, that he's never going to have, that status. And yeah, it's sort of odd seeing that. Even weirder was to see Justin Long, who, because he's not.
He's got 2 sentences.
Yeah, right. Like, he's not a star of the size of Josh Brolin by any means, but you recognise him as soon as you see him, and then you go, he was in for a scene. He's gone.
I know.
Why is he doing there?
I know.
But
it didn't make any sense. And the more you think about things, the more you think things are not very well handled. I would have liked to have seen more of Josh Brolin's relationship with his wife. You get his grief, but it's almost as if it's like he's not part of a family or something. And I would have liked to have seen Justine when she kills Alden Ehrenreich, for that moment to have been lingered over, that so that she experiences a loss, something in her life, that has now been lost. I mean, kind of, this is the guy that she was having an affair with, right? That like excited her, that, and so on. And now he's about to kill her, and when she kills him, I would have liked to have had an emotional beat there about what that loss means to her. Yeah, so she's now safe, but she's also lost something, right? And I think that's kind of mildly suggested, but it's not brought to the fore.
No. No. I mean, a lot of this film is sort of for effect, I suppose. It's like we think of eventually getting to that point, shooting him in the head, but then it doesn't seem all that interested in the real sort of internal lives of these characters and what this might ultimately mean to them in a deeper way. I mean, the film is very effective at getting the kind of scares that it wants, particularly in the kind of first half of the film where people are having those dreams or kind of looking down the hall and was there a noise, that kind of thing. The film is very good at getting you to question what's about to jump out at you and that sort of thing. It's also a little bit simple about it, I think. Like in the dreams, the dad goes looking for his son, he chases him down, he finds him, and then after a while the kid's face turns into the creepy old woman's face, and there's a thing goes, ah, and it's like, okay, great. Really, what is there much to this? I think this is a little bit overblown.
I think for me, one of the things about American horror of the 40s and 50s is that it just looked so great, right? Kind of, you look at some of those B movies at RKO, and they've got such fantastic imagery. And of course, that whole German expressionist stuff is because you could do it cheaply. Right? But it's almost like you think now with the Steadicams and fast film and digital, it's almost like they're just not paying any attention, to kind of composing, and creating an image that lasts, that lingers, that means, kind of.
You can't trust horror fans. Like, their standards are really low for what is actually good cinema.
Yes,
like,
that's true.
You know what I mean? Like, well, when a film is covered in quotes from, Bloody Disgusting or Fangoria or whatever, about a horror film of the century, I shat my pants. And then you watch and you go, was it all that? And what are you seeing that I'm not? Well, you live in a different world to me. That's the thing that's happening. It's like,
sure.
You value different things to me. And the things that they are valuing are not, sort of the complexity of the image, the beauty of the composition, that kind of stuff. Like, they're seeing different things. And that's just, it's a different, vibe.
And there are many different ways of seeing. But I mean, I think my argument also is, that to a lot of audiences it doesn't matter because also they don't know how to see it. They are functionally, visually illiterate.
Yeah, well, that's your job, isn't it?
Too much of a snob about it, but you know.
That's your job, Jose. You got to teach them.
That's right. Well, I think schools need to teach them. I think it's something that should be taught in secondary school, basically.
Yeah.
But the fact is that people watch a film like this and they're still only going to tell you about the plot and they're not going to pay any attention to the visuals at all.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's like
at best they absorb them kind of unconsciously, really.
Yeah, it's like the plot. And it's like, remember when that thing happened and wasn't that scene great? And that's fine,
Yes.
Like we do that too.
Well, you need to do that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there is a whole other kind of dimension of images and composition and light, that kind of create kind of indelible, have the potential to create indelible moments that kind of is what films work with, really, sights and sounds and rhythms.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to feel like a snob sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Indulge.
All right. Well, on that note, I do recommend it, actually. I thought it was fun to see.
Yeah, I think it's fun to see, although I think it's going to be more fun to see if you haven't listened to this podcast and don't know what happens, because I think that's a huge amount of the joy is in going, what the fuck is going to happen.
Well, we warned them.
We did warn you.
Well, thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. It's now been 2 weeks since we saw Weapons, and I want to record a little bit more about it because it's been on my mind since, we talked about, we think it's flawed in various ways, although we also liked it very much. It has been on my mind, though, which the other films we've seen haven't.
Okay.
And there are a couple of things. One is actually kind of a minor point, although it does kind of count. It's another criticism that I have of it, which is that the film starts off with the voiceover from the little girl saying, this is the story about how these kids went missing 2 years ago and they never came back and no one knows what happened. And then it finishes with, here's how they came back. Not that here's how it happened. I mean, that information is just for you, the audience. The people in the town still don't know how it happened, but they know the kids came back. And the film kind of lies to you about that, because I do think it's actually a meaningful thing, because when I'm watching the film, I didn't know what was going to happen. I really couldn't predict a thing. And I didn't know if we would see the kids again, or what state they'd be in, and that sort of thing, or how we would come across them. So when the homeless guy comes across them, he sees them in the basement, and he tells the cop about it. As soon as that happens, I'm thinking, right, well, they can't live to tell the tale, right? Like, the point is, no one knows how this happened within the fiction of the world. So these guys have seen the kids. They can't survive this. They can't tell anyone. And indeed, they both get hypnotised and everything. And so I'm thinking the same thing's going to happen when Josh Brolin and Julia Garner get to the house at the end. Again, I'm thinking, right, so these guys have got to perish now, right? They lose their lives here somehow, something like that. Maybe they get hypnotised, whatever it is. But then they live. They survive, they live, the kids get out, and we're left with that ending, which is, that kind of interesting ending about the kids are sort of long-term catatonic because of this. But I thought, that's kind of not fair to me as, an intelligent viewer who's been following the story and paying attention and putting things together myself, it's not really fair that you did just lie to me about that. You know, because I was talking to my brother about it a little bit, and he was saying that he kind of thinks that the film has a sort of piecemeal attitude to, like, whatever's delightful or whatever's interesting or whatever's effective in the moment is what it goes with, but it doesn't really cohere.
No.
I kind of agree with that. Matt was actually saying something similar as well.
Do. Yeah,
it has a kind of piecemeal attitude, and when it comes to themes, it kind of has a piecemeal attitude to, we'll kind of put in a little bit of it could be about this, a little bit of it could be about that, and we were talking 2 weeks ago about how none of it seems to cohere, and I think that's what he's kind of getting at too. Like, you go, is it about this? Well, yes, but kind of. Kind of not.
Yeah, it doesn't cohere. It's superficial, and it really avoids the larger issue, or making a horror of a larger issue. Because if you think about it abstractly, the real concern here is these children have disappeared, right? And then you find out that they're being used as food for this witch's youth.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, so I suppose there's a fairy tale element to that. But actually, I think even the fairy tales, part of the horror would be, the suggestion of child abuse or rape or violation or something nasty and sordid. I mean, the film avoids all of that, like the plague, right? And I'm sure it's difficult. There are ways of suggesting that without showing it, right? But, to at least make the audience kind of feel the horror of that possibility. And I don't think the film ever does that.
No, I don't either. The other thing I was thinking about in the last couple of weeks, though, is more positive towards the film and more negative towards myself, really. Because, the response has been fantastic towards this film. And I've continued to see lots of praise for it and people talking it up. And I've still been thinking to myself, is it that good? And I think what I've kind of been thinking is this is a film where I think you kind of have to be American or live in America to really get it. I think
how so?
Because I think one of the themes that it is playing on that I don't think we really discussed is, I think it kind of speaks to a very generalized culture of fear, and I think it's a very particularly American culture of fear, in which, I mean, the title Weapons, I think, is indicative of that, because it's a culture in which people are walking around with guns.
I know.
And the school shooting is a common sort of occurrence. And, the film is obviously playing on that with the empty classroom, the kids who've just disappeared, as we mentioned. And I do think there is something uniquely American about the way in which that must affect your life. Because I think it is a very American response that I'm seeing all this praise. I think there's something very innate in that response, that they get it in a way that we just don't. Like, we can read about it and we can watch the TV and stuff and understand those stories, but we don't get it in the way that you do if you live it.
So rather than violation, you're thinking of like all these school killings, basically.
And not even just that, but just a generalized culture in which you're constantly under threat at any moment. It's kind of built into the culture that violence is there and violence is a possibility. It's kind of crystallized when you think of school shootings, because that's a very specific kind of event. But I think it is very general. I think, we were kind of talking down the villain a little bit. Certainly you were. You were saying, it's just a witch. And it kind of is. But I also think there's something about her look that's kind of... There's almost like a mad Uncle Sam parody to the way she looks.
By the way, I mean, for me, I might, but I wouldn't dismiss something for having a witch. I mean, I love witches and I love that kind of science fiction and so on. I think it's the way, this particular witch is shown to us, right?
Yeah.
And how that witchery fits into, or sorcery fits into the rest of the narrative that's a problem for me.
For sure. But I do think there's a little bit more to it than I hadn't seen the first time. Like I say, I think there's something about her look and the way it's so gaudy and so imposing, and there's something about that. It's almost a kind of visual violence, the way she shows up in people's lives, and the thing about the snapping of the twig, that is the action that causes the spell to work, and the spell is flying into a homicidal rage, and the idea of you snap and fly into a homicidal rage. Again, particularly speaks to the kind of narratives around school shootings with the kid who was like the quiet kid or whatever, and then one day he just went, sort of thing. There is definitely something about that kind of that imagery in that I think that is quite a powerful metaphor that the film I think feels intentional. And so I do think I think there's definitely more depth to it than I was giving it credit for. I still think it doesn't really cohere that much, but I do think this is maybe an example of just, I just didn't get it because I'm not in that world.
Maybe you're right. I mean, I don't want to give it any credit for depth, really. I mean, I think certainly, if they attempted to put it there, it didn't convey it to me. I still do think that it's one of the most more entertaining films that we've seen.
Yeah.
And my theory is that people are loving it so much because there's just such a dearth of entertaining films around. I mean, we've seen all of these films that we found things to like in them, but that, none of them you go, wow. I mean, even the films that we've praised the most, like Friendship and,
The Ballad of Wallace Island.
The Ballad of Wallace Island, they're very uneven films.
For sure,
right?
Yeah.
So I think this is one that is most pleasing to an audience. Like you watch it and it's fun, right? But certainly I would resist any claims for it being any more than that.
Yeah. I do think...
Or successful at any more than that.
Yeah. I do think that one of the reasons it is being so praised is there's an element of self-fulfilling hype about it. Because this film had a lot of hype before. Actually, when Matt saw it, he said he was in London and he went to see it. And I said, did it match the hype? And he was like, this was hyped up. He'd missed it, right? And he's like, because it didn't feel like a film that would be hyped up to me, he said. Part of the hype was that Jordan Peele, who is kind of considered a new master of horror.
Yes.
So he made Get Out, which was incredible. He made Us and Nope, which both have very good reputations. And he's seen as a kind of, he very openly allegorizes kind of issues of racism and all sorts of other things through his horror films, and he's kind of well known for doing that. And he was in his company, I think Monkey Paw Productions is the name of his company. They were in bidding for this script, and he was saying this is going to be film of the year, I've got to get this script. And when they lost out on it, he fired, I think, his managers. So heads rolled over it kind of thing, and this was big news. He believes in this film so much that he fired his managers over it. And so I think people kind of bought into that a little bit as this pre-approval of the film, and then it comes out, and then you don't want to believe that maybe you were believing in something that's a little bit overhyped, and so you just keep on buying into it. It's no, this film is great. It has to be because I thought so to start with. There's an element of that, I think.
I mean, the thing is that in Jordan Peele's hands, you could see how the narrative has the potential to allegorize all kinds of things in such interesting ways.
Yeah.
The question is, does this film succeed at doing that? And my response is no.
No. I mean, you do kind of think how much better it might have been had he produced it and been involved. But I think there is this thing of Jordan Peele believes in it, so it has to be that good. And maybe it wasn't in the end, but you kind of still just let yourself buy it.
Yeah. Still, I think there are wonderful things in it, really. So I think, for example, the face of the actress that plays the witch, to me, it almost feels like one of those neighborhood crackhead faces, right?
Amy Madigan is the actress.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And also, I think the school teacher, is really superb. And there's Josh Brolin, right? It's not a film to be dismissed, but I think it's been overpraised.
Yeah, there isn't actually a thing about Josh Brolin. I mean, there's another element of he's definitely kind of Republican coded, isn't he? The way he looks, the way he drives, that kind of thing. There's an element of, I don't know, maybe it's not very meaningful, but there's definitely something to that too. Actually, it's funny, we were talking not long ago about psychobiddy, which was a term we'd only recently become familiar with, and there's definitely an element of that with the witch character, psychobiddy. And it's also not very fair. I mean, I was reading a little bit about psychobiddy, the psychobiddy sort of archetype, and people saying one of the things is that this is considered something that was very unfair to the actresses because they were made to be ugly, their age was accentuated, and they were meant to be these figures of horror. And very often in the 70s and 80s, it was formerly starring actresses who were now playing these roles, and it was really unfair to sort of to their past. And Amy Madigan is one. She's had a very long career, and
Yes,
now she's doing this.
I know her.
Yeah, and there is an element of that. Like, it doesn't feel very fair to her, although she is given a lot of good stuff to do. I mean, that scene where she's with the kid, and she's the parents are catatonic, and she's telling the kid, like, this is the way it is, and you're going to keep my secret. But fucking threatening. It's very good.
I was watching Guy Ritchie's King Arthur last night on television.
Oh yeah.
And it has Jude Law in an equivalent of a Psycho Biddy role, right?
Right.
Yeah. So he starts off. So Eric Bana is Charlie Hunnam's father, and Charlie Hunnam becomes Arthur, right?
Okay.
And Eric Bana is killed by his brother, who is Jude Law, right? Who's taken over by some sorcery or Mordred or something. I forget exactly. But anyway, he becomes monstrous, right? But the monstrosity is heroic, lithe, beautiful, right? Like, so he starts off as looking very, very beautiful, Jude Law, which is amazing because really the film was only made
2017, I've got it here.
Yeah. And then by the end of the film, he's monstrous, right? But this process of monstrosity still has all these heroic qualities and even beauty that is always denied to these psychobiddies.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, I mean, I think the only exception to that would be Angelina Jolie's wicked stepmother in those films. Maleficent, where, she's evil, and aging and so on.
But with beautifully sculpted cheekbones.
And also beautiful movements. Yeah. Right? Sure. Her every act of witchcraft is somehow elegant and lithe and gorgeous. So, and actually that's interesting because she's one of the few action heroines, and she's accorded the same kind of respect that male movie stars often are, which is something that is really denied to the Amy Madigan old biddies. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I think people would probably then not consider Maleficent a psycho biddy character. I mean, that keeps her out of that category for that reason.
I know, but in fact she is really, isn't she?
Well, she has
the aging stepmother, worried about the younger competition, worried about keeping her beauty.
Yeah,
it's very,
no, for sure,
similar. So, but yes, she's not going to be considered an aging biddy because actually the film treats her with more respect. She's visualized, with more respect because she's a bigger star.
That's interesting.
So anyway,
thanks for that.
You're welcome.
It was on my mind. I've got to get it off your mind sometimes,
No, I'm happy to.